Welcome to the Paying Attention podcast. I'm Brent Beasley, leader of Fort Worth Education Partnership, and we are continuing our conversation with Fort Worth ISD Superintendent Karen Molinar. We have already talked about a lot of things, and we have a lot more that we can talk about, including a big topic from this past year, which was school closures and consolidations. And it's a great example of what we talked about in the last episode, where you didn't waste any time. You weren't just minding the store, being a lame duck, or any of those kinds of images. You really showed a lot of leadership in year one. And closing schools is a really hard thing to do. It's probably one of the hardest things that any school district can tackle. And so you tackled that back in the spring. You ended up deciding to close or consolidate 18 schools. So talk about, and you got a unanimous vote from the board on it. So talk about, I think first, why the district needed to do that, because can be confusing to people who think of Fort Worth as this fast growing city, which it is, but why is it that the Fort Worth ISD part of the city needed to think about closing schools?
Yeah, not probably, was the hardest part of my journey as a leader, was going through school closures and consolidations, just because I'm a little bit unique because I started my career here. I've been here 27 years. So every single school, those 18, I had been in somehow, some way, multiple times, and just feel part of every school in this community. So that was an emotional part for me as well. But I think it helped because I could lead it with compassion and understand the communities were different. Each community is different for our campuses, which really brings in, in 10 years ago, 85,000 students. Now we're barely hitting 68,000 with projections. But we're living in one of the fastest growing cities, and best cities in the United States. But we have a decline in enrollment. Some of that, of course, is low birth rate. We had a demographer come in right away and do a study, do trend histories. Some of it is charter schools have come in, and our parents want choice. We've tried to give them choice through schools of choice. But however, with our academic achievement and our academic scores, sometimes that choice is leaving us. So we've battled that, as well as private schools in addition. And there's been a homeschool. That's something a lot of people don't talk about, but there's
after
a lot.
COVID,
after COVID, we lost a lot of students who parents just decided, hey, I can do this. And there's a lot more opportunities for homeschooling, but then still have a virtual support for their students. And that's what we want. We want every parent to have a choice, but of course we want them to pick us first.
Right.
And then in addition to that, Fort Worth ISD, we are the center of the city, urban. There's not a lot of new build growth. We're growing as a city, but our city, as you know, is very widespread. And a lot of people don't realize that Keller and Eagle Mountain, Saginaw, that's part of the city of Fort Worth. And that's where all the new build. For us in Fort Worth ISD, it's Benbrook side, it's the west side. But that's my only new growth area for me in Fort Worth ISD boundaries. But it's difficult because for years, and I can say it because I actually went out and helped campaign for bonds or speak about bonds, was that we sold bonds on neighborhood schools. That's how we said, we're neighborhood schools, invest in your neighborhood schools. And now I'm telling parents, I have to close your neighborhood school because of lost enrollment. But there's efficiency to it. My job is also look at student outcomes in addition to facility conditions. And what we're seeing is our facilities, they have not been upkept very well, preventative maintenance. So we did in addition to demographic study, we did a condition facility index study where we were looking at, here's where the building's sitting right now. Here's what we would need to invest in for this building to be put into a green area where it would be efficiently safe and be able to work properly for our students to receive instruction. So without even looking at the enrollment, you first have to look at that facility. And we just have a facility issue here where some of these buildings are not fit for our students to be in with the right heating and air condition.
Yeah. I was on this steering committee that looked at all of that with the district leadership, and not that I don't know if we had any real say in the decision, but we at least looked at it together and gave input. And that was something that stood out to me, was you had great information on basically the quality of the buildings, and there was a score given to each building. And so, like you said, it wasn't just enrollment patterns, but it was also factoring in the quality. So that was part of it, is sort of this kind of, in some cases, crumbling infrastructure around the city, and then also then layered on top of that is the enrollment. And so there's a lot of schools I know with 50-60% capacity.
Yes.
So you had basically just too many schools for the number of students. And so how did you look at the enrollment side?
So this is when we look at where's your live-in enrollment. So we took each of our campuses, and we have boundary lines. So we took what's the live-in currently in enrollment. Not necessarily are the students going there, because some may be going to charter or private, or one of our schools of choice, but live in what's the population, because then we could look at trends for the next 5 years, because we already have people living here. If they choose to have kids, which we hope we do, we want, this is when you do promote, people having children, multiple children, then we would be able to see a trend history of enrollment. But then when you see that you don't have many families living in, maybe it's more elderly, or it's turned more into retail or business, and a lot less homes, apartments. Some of the apartments, even here on the outskirts of the downtown Fort Worth, they are not producing students. They are young couples or single professional couples, but not students. So we have to take all of that into play when we're looking and making decisions of which campuses we need to consolidate. First is consolidation. And then after we decide what's the best boundary lines, you look at transportation. How far would you be moving this student? Would you be making them go across the freeway? So what's the hazard route there? So we look at all of that. Where's a better route, a safer route? How's this going to increase it?
I remember in some of those discussions, there were people from Worth ISD staff, Kelly Spencer and Mike Naughton, or who I'm thinking of in that room, who knew so well these kinds of things, because we would be looking at maps and enrollment and think, well, why don't these kids could go here, and then Mike Naughton would say, but there's a railroad track that runs right in between there that we just didn't know about, that actually makes it hard. You'd have to go all the way around here. It was very complicated to figure out what might work. More complicated than what you could just see on paper.
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, if we could just draw lines and then streets, that's a lot easier. That's not what's best for kids.
And then you have to think about you mentioned emotions from your side, as you've been in all these schools and know them well, but also then every school that you're talking about is a whole set of emotions with all the people that are there now, the people who went there. You have to think about the traditions and the politics of all of that. Like, could you factor all that part of it in as well, or was it strictly, I know you had to deal with that part of it.
You try not to factor too much of that in there. Just because that everyone has a connection. And the louder voice can't always be the only connection. So we really had to be consistent with how we looked at it with data. And we got challenged quite a bit of why weren't we using accountability ratings to make those decisions around achievement.
I may have been one who...
But and what I tried to really share and explain is our accountability system in the state changes, frequently may not be the right word, but it feels like it. So a campus can go from an A to a C or a D, just like we've had some of our campuses go from an F to a B this year. So if I just did ratings or accountability scores, that could have changed before the phase-in of that closure. So it really was looking at the facility index, the condition of those buildings, what would it take if it's a new roof, new heating, new HVAC, new windows, safety of that building, all of those things and the millions and millions of dollars, then that means you also have to say, am I going to be able to ask our public to come back out for a bond and give us money and support it?
Yeah.
So those are all the factors. What could we do now that we wouldn't need a bond for?
Right. Yeah. To me, there's a great example of that kind of factors all that in, which is a school that I know well. It's because it's right across the street from my house. I can sit on my front porch and look at the dumpsters right across from my house.
We'll get those moved.
Yeah, right. But it's a Days of All Elementary. It's a small, good little school.
Fantastic school.
And so this committee and y'all looking at this, and here's a school that's small, 200, close to 200 students, I think. And then you looked at the projected live-in enrollment in its attendance boundary, and it was about 200 students. I mean, there wasn't really a path for growth. And then about 5 blocks south on the same street is another elementary school, Daggett Elementary, that has more room in it. The Days of All didn't have the room, so you have to look at capacity. And then also the building quality index that you mentioned was much better down the street at Daggett than it was at Days of All. So you kind of put all of that together, and that's how you come to those kind of decisions to consolidate Days of All into Daggett. And I think whereas when I first heard about it, I thought, no, I don't think you should close Days of All. That makes no sense. But then when you kind of factor all that in, you can start to understand how we get there.
Yeah, it is data driven. We want to make decisions around student achievement around data. This was another way that we use data to make really informed decisions. And when you look at your example of Days of All, the students living in there were making other options because their attendants are not those students living there. The majority of their attendance is students transferring in for a special program that we're having a hard time staffing, which is our dual language. We're having a hard time in bilingual. So we have to take that into in play as well. I mean, so if we can't staff a dual language there, you're dropping down to 95 students because even the families who live there are choosing a school down the street over their home campus.
Yeah. To learn more about Fort Worth Education Partnership, check out our website, fortworthep.org. And we are on Instagram at fortworthep. Let's talk about the human element of this. You've got teachers and principals in these schools that are closing or consolidating. You've got students who are, in most cases, I would assume, moving from a smaller school into a larger school. How are you thinking about that? I know I've thought about, we talk about teacher shortages, principal shortages. I've thought, well, this is one way that helps that. You need 18 fewer principals, right? 18 fewer assistant principals. So there's that kind of piece of it. There's also the adjustments. How are you thinking about all the faculty and staff and student experience of all this?
So what people either they don't know or they forget is that we have done this before in Fort Worth ISD. We recently merged Wedgwood 6th grade into Wedgwood 7 and 8. So that's just one example, but we've also done G6 into Forest Oak. So we've had experience with this, but you are right. It's also around the human aspect. So what we do first is we look at the enrollment, and when we're consolidating the campuses, we of course want the teachers to travel with the students because that helps with that emotional connection, that community connection as well. We have some teachers though who say, this is a great opportunity for me to get closer to home for myself, but I never would have done or made that decision unless this happened. And we honor that. So we first work with our teachers and our staff to make sure. We've been very lucky that we've been able to make sure all of our staff has a home. But the other side of that is if we don't do this, we are going to have to start taking resources away from the small campuses. And we're really actually discussing that even at this point. All of our elementary schools have a full-time principal, full-time AP, a full-time counselor. We have most of them majority librarians, art, music. And those are decisions that we would need to make and may still have to make, that where do you go to a part-time? So then we start seeing where our students are losing the resources by being in such a small campus. So it's really looking at it from both ways. How do you protect that culture and climate without also taking things away from the student experience?
Yeah. What about the properties of these schools? I know that's something that people are probably thinking about. I haven't heard a lot of talk about it actually, about what's going to happen to these buildings and these pieces of land.
So we did 18 campuses, and it's really a 5-year phase process. We have 4 campuses that will be consolidated this year. So each of those 4 campuses are being treated in isolation of one, planning new bus routes, planning, of course, the consolidation with staff and the students and families. But then we look at the building. What does that community need? Most of our campuses now actually have a food pantry or a care closet on them. You know, the needs of our students are so great, but then it's now the responsibility of a school to provide all these different needs. So it does take up instructional time. So if that particular community needs a community center with a food pantry and a care closet and some other type of outside resource, then let's see what that building can be used for. But we have to think of it as a business as well. We can't just say, here's a school building with the utilities and properties. And then some of our buildings, we had one this year that we weren't planning on closing, but because of the condition of the foundation of that campus, we had to remove those kids. And so that's when we know we have to demo. And we do have some out of that 18 that we will be having to make that very hard decision about demoing it, but maintaining the property, because we know there can be a shift in enrollment. We want all of our students to experience a nice new school. So keeping the property could mean that later on there's a brand new school built there, and then we move students from a consolidated building back into a brand new building.
Yeah.
So there's lots of options. Yeah. We've also we've been working with our partners at Rainwater, who have done a great study looking at affordable housing for teachers.
I've heard
for first responders.
About this idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're looking at like what parts of the city where our young teachers want to go live, and we can help them also have affordable housing.
Yeah, I love that idea. Yeah. I'll show you a property across the street from my house that could be a good,
that one
good
keeps
one for
rises to the top.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah. So what kind of, we've talked in the last episode and this about some hard things, hard decisions, big and important things. What kind of reaction and support are you getting from the community over this past year?
Yeah. Well, definitely a lot of support, parents and community, business, elected officials in the city. It's been a lot. When I think about everything I've done within the year of not even permanent, but interim in this, a lot of superintendents don't have to ever experience it.
Right.
So I feel like I've written my book in one chapter here, but I know there's more to come. And sometimes that's the scary part, the unknowing of what's going to come. But overall, the support has been overwhelming. But I would say is because we always make a decision focused on students and communicating that decision, but then also being realistic how hard those decisions have been. I'm pretty transparent in data, but I'm transparent as a person when it comes to my leadership, that these aren't easy decisions for me. But I also think you can't keep pushing it down the road and kicking the can down the road, because we've been talking about school closures for years, and no one did it. And so it was at the point where we cannot sustain how we are currently.
As long as I've been doing this, we've known Fort Worth has smaller than usual schools as far as enrollment. It's just one of these things about Fort Worth.
To learn more about today's guest, Superintendent Dr. Karen Molinar, you can check out the Fort Worth ISD website, fwisd.org. And they're also on Instagram at Fort Worth ISD.
You've been in Fort Worth a long time, 27 years, I think you said.
Yes.
But you're not from here, you're from Delaware. So how did you end up here in Fort Worth from Delaware?
So much to my parents' dismay, went to a college in Maryland, Salisbury State University, known to be an education college. Day one, you work with students and you work how to teach students to read. Just loved being in that setting. And at that time, and when I was graduating college, it was hard to find a teaching job in Delaware and in Maryland, and there were just not a lot of vacancies. Totally different than where we are right now.
Yeah.
But there was that time. And I was interviewing in North Carolina and also looking, of course, in Delaware and Maryland. And then one of our professors said, hey, Fort Worth ISD in Texas, Fort Worth, Texas is coming to recruit, and they're flying to Maryland. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to date myself right now, but I used to watch the show Dallas. So
Right.
I thought everyone was a billionaire oil man. They owned a big ranch, and I said, this is great. Interviewed and getting ready to walk out the door. And Mr. Garcia, he's one of our recruiters, who of course is retired, pulls me back in and gives me a letter of intent. And so I signed it, and I had no idea what I was signing, honestly. Got home, told my dad, my mom, I signed, and they're like, what did you do? Let me see, let me read this.
Yeah.
And right then, it just felt right. Had never been to Texas, never. And came here and found, they give you a job, but not a school. And then you come to a job fair and you find your school, but you're guaranteed a position. And I just lucked out. I lucked out that I was at Washington Heights Elementary on the north side of Fort Worth. It's underground school. Rode by there with my mom, and she starts crying. She goes, it's not a real school. Because there literally was not a school on top.
Yeah.
Now there is.
I've seen that Van St. Gwyn.
Yes, same thing. There was two schools at the time. And I just felt like I had to stay and try it.
Yeah.
And I was embraced by not only the staff and the principal there. The principal saw something in me I never saw in myself. Of course, I was single, young, small school. So you were on every committee. And every time they needed someone to lead a committee or go to a meeting for the district, I went because, I wasn't married. I didn't have kids at the time. And she tapped me. She says, you need to be an assistant principal. And Rebecca Ramirez was her name, and she retired and she's passed since then. And I mean, so grateful for her seeing something in me that I didn't see in myself, never would have thought that I could be a principal. And that was my goal, principal. That was it. Yeah. And then each step, it's been someone who has tapped me and said, I want you to be a director to supervise principals. And I was on vacation with my mom and my daughter, and they kept calling me. They're like, you haven't put your application in yet. And I'm like, I'm good. I love my school. I love my parents. I love my students. I love being a principal. But then they kept calling and say, try.
Yeah.
So I always tell our leaders that in our school district now, take the time to tap somebody.
Yeah, that's great.
Because that's how we build our pipeline.
Yeah. I always think about vocation or calling. It's like part of it is what you feel inside about what I feel called to or whatever, but it's also what other people see in you. And if you feel it inside but nobody sees it in you, that might tell you something.
Yeah, right.
But when other people really see it, that's so important and validating. And I love hearing that people have done that for you.
I've been so blessed with that.
Yeah.
Very much so.
And you were at a high level, really kind of just under the superintendents since I've been around paying attention to these things, but worked under several of the different superintendents. Yes. Yeah. Kind of a go-to person is the way I saw you. They
call me the Olivia Pope. She'll figure it out.
We always laughed about with one, Dr. Scribner, we would come to him with some idea or something maybe we would fund or something like that. And then he would say, that sounds great. Go talk to Karen.
Yeah, that's Karen. That was his favorite line.
Yeah. One of the things that happened in the legislature this past spring was a ban on cell phones in schools. That's a pretty big change. I've I've had kids in high school for what seems like 30 years. It's been a long time until recently. And then my daughter was teaching in high school. So, and cell phones is such a big part, has been such a big part of it.
Huge.
And so I'm really curious, like, how that's working this year.
I can't, like, I shouldn't be surprised, because that's, we should never be surprised of holding expectations for our students and them not reaching them. But amazingly so smooth. And I'm not, there on a daily basis in every school. However, I have intentionally go to my middle and my high schools these last few weeks to watch the implementation of no cell phones. And it has gone great. We see kids talking more, they're reading. Southwest High School posted on their Facebook page last night just a montage of kids reading a book outside.
That's great.
No cell phones. And I know we're always going to have little things. But they're listening in class, they're engaged. I asked them, I'm like, okay, so tell me the truth, how's it going? They're like, it's fine, we're fine. And we're not having videos posted all over the place, Instagram.
Videos that lead to fights or of fights.
But you know who, when the bill passed, it was the parents who struggled the most.
Not surprised.
When we put everything out, we put expectations out, the comments were parents driven. Like, you're not gonna, like, I need to get a hold of my child. Well, my mom, like, she called the office. Or if I had early dismissal, she showed up. Or, and it's also making sure they know we still have an avenue if you need to get a hold of your student too. But we're struggling with communication in general, not just with our students, but as our parents become younger, they want information differently, and we want them to partner with us. Some want it very immediately, they want to be told everything. Then we have another level of parents who are like, why are you sending me stuff like 3 or 4 times a day? Opt out, opt out. Then we have grandparents who are like, I need you to send that home in their backpack. It's not getting home in the backpack, I can tell you, but that's their need. So we're really, like, just as a system trying to figure out all the layers of how to engage the partners. And when I say partners, everyone from a mom to aunt to a grandparent. Or to older sibling who's helping raise the younger sibling.
It's such a shift. Jamie, my wife, and I talk about this a lot. The things that we know about our kids day to day compared to what our parents knew about us day to day is radically different. That's it. We would just, when we went off to college, we'll talk to you at Christmas.
That was it. Crazy. I can watch my child, she's in college. I can see how fast she's driving on the Life 360. Girl, slow it down, It's amazing.
One of the things I heard, Jonathan Haidt writes a lot about, it's kids and social media and all that. He has that book, The Anxious Generation, I think it's called. I heard him speak to a gathering of school leaders one time, and he was really getting on to them. This was before this legislature made the decision for you, but he was getting on to them about, you got to get rid of the cell phones. And he was saying it's not just putting them away in class, and so it's not disturbing the learning time, but it's lunch and the hallways, because it changes the dynamic of how people are interacting. I heard you kind of speak to that a little bit, that you're starting to see maybe that people interacting with each other instead of walking down the hall head down or at lunch. And I love hearing that.
We definitely see that increasing. Some schools have even shared that now you see them playing cards, board games. We were sharing with some middle schoolers. We used to write notes and make them like a football or make that one paper game. You make choices and what kind of house you want to live in, what kind of car you want to drive. So we just see them now just enjoying each other more.
Do you think, I don't know if you're not in schools every day, but do you think it feels like, especially when we think about things happening in the news these days and just our own experience, like, do you think boys have been affected more by this cell phone online world, or maybe it's just different between boys and girls?
I definitely think the platform lends itself to the gaming in addition to the social media parts, but then in addition to that, a lot of the gaming is directed towards our young males versus our females. But it's also the interaction of what are you doing tonight? Like, we're going to the football game, and when we were growing up, we just said, "Are you going to the football game? I'll see you there,"
Yeah.
and that was pretty much it. So we see also the interaction between boys and girls, as well as like how do you make new friends? How do you engage outside of a structure activity? But definitely we do see our young men who tend to not be as social anyway as girls,
Right.
developmentally.
Yeah.
So hiding behind the phone is definitely a lot easier
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah. I feel like watching the last several years, maybe it started with COVID, I'm not sure, but superintendents in North Texas have had struggles. It's been a hard time these last 5 or 6 years. You've seen turnover in most positions, I feel like. And a lot of these kind of cultural, political issues have made life pretty hard on superintendents. But it seems like you have not, that's one thing you haven't really had as much of. Maybe you feel like you have, but from the outside watching, I just wonder how you've navigated some of the sort of hot button, difficult political things that have kind of plagued public education in the last few years.
Well, first, I'm a rule follower. So if there's a policy that's put in place or a law that's passed, I'm going to follow the rules. Because I do believe if we don't have those and if it's not followed, there's a reason why it was put in place, and people can have their opinions about who put in place or whatever.
Yeah.
That's my job is to implement and protect. And so I feel like I have to be that steady, not just for our students, but for our employees as well. But I think that goes back to I'm a pretty transparent person.
Yeah.
All my decisions are going to be student focused. Of course, while still taking care of our faculty and staff and our employees. But I think that also gives me the right to just focus on school and achievement and what's best for our district. And, things are going to change. As long as I've been alive, administration has changed, things have changed, in our country. And, but school systems are the most traditional, form of structure. And so that there has to be that institution, there has to be that landmark that our kids can come every day and we feed them breakfast and lunch. Every student in our district gets free breakfast and lunch if they take advantage or not, and a free public education. Yeah. And I don't want to get in the middle of all the other stuff. That's like, I have to figure out how do I provide what my kids need every day still.
Yeah. I feel like I've seen you speak in lots of different settings, and I feel like people feel that you're being honest and leveling with people, as you said, being transparent, and I know that helps with all of that. I really appreciate you doing that with us in this podcast, being honest and transparent and leveling with us. You've really done that. So thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
You're welcome. Anytime. I appreciate giving me the opportunity to share what we're doing in Fort Worth.
Yeah, thank you. This is a Fort Worth Education Partnership production. To watch Paying Attention, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also listen to Paying Attention wherever you get your podcasts.